I always thought playful teasing was part of every healthy marriage. Light jokes that made gatherings fun, kept conversation alive, and reminded everyone how close two people could be. My name is Lana, and my husband Ross had always been the calm, observant type, the kind of man who rarely reacted, rarely got ruffled, rarely let anything ruin his peace. So that night at a dinner party surrounded by friends and family, I thought a harmless joke would make everyone laugh. I had no idea it would leave the entire table in stunned silence. The evening started perfectly. Warm lights glowing through the dining room, a long wooden table covered in candles and polished cutlery, the aroma of roasted garlic and butter drifting through the air. Ross had spent the whole day helping our host prepare. He always took charge in the kitchen without needing applause. Our guests adore him for it. And maybe that's what stirred something in me, an urge to reclaim a little attention, to be the one people laughed with instead of the quiet shadow beside him. As everyone settled in, wine flowed generously and conversations grew louder, overlapping like cheerful noise. Ross sat at the far end talking with her friends about work and weekend plans. He looked so composed, so effortlessly confident. And I felt that old familiar pinch, the fear of being the less interesting one, the quieter one, the one people remembered only because I was Ross's wife. So when someone joked about how patient he was, the words slipped out before I could stop them. Patient. Oh, please. I laughed. Ross is only patient because he's used to tuning me out. Half the time I don't think he listens to anything I say unless I repeat it twice. The table erupted in light laughter. It was meant to be playful, friendly, nothing more. I expected Ross to smile politely and let it pass. He usually did, but that night he didn't. He stopped mid-sip, lowered his glass, and looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen in years. Not anger, not hurt, but something sharper, something calculating. The table quieted slowly, sensing a shift in the air. I held his gaze, waiting for the usual chuckle, the shrug, the safe response. But instead, Ross leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and said in a perfectly calm, perfectly steady voice, "It's not that I don't listen, Lana. It's that I'm tired of being spoken about like I'm not in the room." The room froze. You could have heard the candles flickering. A few guests cleared their throats. My smile faltered, and I felt my face burn. Ross wasn't done. "You wanted a laugh," he continued softly. "But jokes usually land better when they're not at the expense of the one person who shows up for you every single time." His words weren't harsh. They were precise, surgical, every syllable deliberate, and painfully true. I swallowed hard, suddenly aware that this wasn't about the joke. This had been building quietly for months. Small comments, playful jabs, little digs I told myself were harmless because everyone laughed. I hadn't realized what they sounded like to him. How they chipped away at his pride with each retelling. He never complained. He never snapped. He just absorbed it until he couldn't anymore. Trying to break the tension, I reached for his hand, but he gently moved his away. Not in anger, but in exhaustion. "Ross, I didn't mean," he cut me off with a quiet exhale. "I know you didn't, but intent doesn't erase impact." His voice trembled just enough for only me to notice. And in that trembling, guilt struck me deep. This wasn't a man defending himself to the table. This was a man telling his wife he'd been hurting for a long time. Our friends shifted awkwardly in their seats, unsure whether to intervene or disappear. The host tried to lighten the mood, but even the jokes fell flat. The atmosphere had completely changed because Ross had spoken a truth everyone felt, but no one had expected him to voice. He wasn't the silent one tonight. He wasn't the background character. He was the man reclaiming his dignity in front of everyone who mattered. When dinner resumed, the air felt heavy, delicate, like one wrong word could shatter the room. Ross barely spoke. I barely ate. I spent most of the meal replaying my words. How easily I tossed them out. How confidently I assumed he'd just take it. I had mistaken his silence for strength, not realizing silence can also be where someone hides their wounds. After dessert, when people began to leave, Ross finally walked over to me, not with anger, but with tired honesty in his eyes. "Lana," he murmured, "I need you to build me up in front of people, not tear me down, even as a joke." His voice cracked on the last word, and something inside me cracked with it. I apologized genuinely, tearfully, and for the first time that night, he pulled me into his arms. We drove home in quiet reflection, fingers interlocked on the center console. That night turned our dinner party upside down, yes, but it also turned something inside me right side up. I realized how easily love can be bruised by the things we pretend are harmless. And as we walked into our home, Ross's hand, still firmly holding mine, I made myself a silent promise. Never again would I trade his respect for a moment of laughter. Some lines I finally understood should never be crossed, even for a